Night fell fast over the freeway as a black sedan swerved to the shoulder, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The rear door cracked open, and a tan dog tumbled onto gravel, skidding hard enough to scrape fur and hope. Victor Hale said, "Useless mutt," and the doors slammed with a hollow thud that sounded like a verdict. Engines roared past, spraying grit, while the dog staggered to his feet and stared at the vanishing taillights. He did not whimper, but his ribs told their thin story beneath a coat scuffed by miles and bad luck. Headlights washed over him, white rivers of light that made him squint and brace for impact. A horn blared, and he flinched toward the median pause, slipping on the oily stones. He looked back once, as if a name might still be waiting in that dark car, but the lane swallowed it whole. A gust lifted a torn receipt that stuck to his nose, and he shook it away, ashamed by the smallness of it. Somewhere beyond the guardrail, the night smelled of rain and bread, and he chose the bread. He crossed the embankment and found a service road that smelled like old fries and damp cardboard. The night felt wider here, no horns, only the hush of distant tires and a humming sign. A dumpster rattled, and he froze, ribs drawing tight as breath counted the danger. A raccoon clattered away, and silence returned with a shy kind of mercy. He reached the awning and curled beneath its drip line, nose tucked to keep the wet out. A worker stepped outside, glanced his way, and flicked ash that glowed like a tiny comet. The worker said, "No dogs, not cruel, just practiced," and the door swung shut on warmth. Hunger turned the air to shapes, each smell a promise he could almost touch. He closed his eyes, listening for footsteps that meant food or trouble. Dreams did not come, but the shivers slowed as the rain softened to a whisper. Dawn bruised the clouds with a thin lavender line, and the air cooled before it warmed. He rose stiffly, shook once and tested the road like a swimmer toes first. A delivery van hissed past, and a paper bag tumbled free, pirouetting toward the gutter. He chased the smell of egg and salt, skidding to catch the prize before the water swallowed it. A driver leaned out and laughed, then shut the window, the sound clipped short by glass. He carried the bag to the curb and licked the paper as if it might bloom food again. A sparrow hopped close, bold with hunger, and he nudged the crumbs its way. Miles Carter said, "Careful there, buddy," while lifting crates, voice warmer than the street. He watched the man leave, tail making a small uncertain wag that felt like a rehearsal. The sun broke low and soft, and his shadow finally looked like it belonged to someone. By mid-morning, traffic thickened, and the station filled with hurried voices and restless tires. He kept to the painted edge, where warmth spilled from the glass like a river he could not cross. Inside, a child pointed, but a hand drew them away, the lesson quicker than the look. He lowered his head and pretended to sleep as a shoe scuffed near his ribs. Victor Hale said, "Still here, passing by with coffee, surprise, thin as steam." The scent hit like a memory, and he shrank without moving, waiting for the cup to vanish. The door chimed twice, and the world continued, indifferent as weather. A gust pushed a napkin against his nose, and he let it sit there, foolish and brave. He counted heartbeats until the shake in his legs settled, and the street found its rhythm. The sun climbed, and the shade retreated, and he drifted toward the alley's cooler breath. He followed the smell of bread to the side door, where scraps sometimes fell like small miracles. A woman paused there, arms full of boxes, and noticed him without flinching. Emma Brooks said, "Hey, you okay?" The words small and gentle, made to be trusted. He did not move, but his tail made a quiet decision that his feet could not. She set a box down and crouched, palms open, letting patience do the work. Her coat rustled, soft as a nest, and he breathed in the shape of safety. Someone called her name and she answered, 1 second, with a smile he almost understood. He stepped an inch closer, then another, drawn by the warm bread and the warmer voice. The door swung, and light framed them both like a promise borrowed from noon. He waited there, between shadow and shine, and the day waited with him. Rusty wandered further from the bakery, paws tapping the cracked pavement as dawn warmed into day. His eyes searched faces that hurried past, each one too busy to see the ribs beneath his skin. A child tugged at her mother's sleeve and whispered, "Can we help him?" But the answer was a shake. He lowered his head, feeling invisible, yet his tail twitched as if hope refused to vanish. The air carried the smell of roasted coffee, laughter spilling from open cafe doors he dared not enter. Rusty paused, watching shoes shuffle, coats flap, voices weave like threads he could not touch. The world moved without him, but his gaze clung to a pair of kind eyes that lingered. Emma Brooks said, "You again," her voice soft with recognition, but she was pulled inside by a call. The door shut, glass reflecting Rusty's lonely frame back at him, fragile but unbroken. He turned toward the alley, heart heavy but tethered to the echo of her gentle tone. He drifted into the marketplace where stalls bristled with bright fruits and sharp voices. A crate fell, apples scattering like marbles, and Rusty froze, ears sharp, tail tucked. A boy laughed, tossing one apple toward him, but his father pulled him back with a stern look. Rusty sniffed the fruit, teeth scraping the skin, savoring sweetness that vanished too quickly. Vendors shouted prices, hands waving, and the noise pressed close like a storm of human tides. One voice cut through, harsh and bitter. Victor Hale said, "Get out of here," kicking near his paws. Rusty flinched back, the apple rolling away, and his eyes sank to the ground. The crowd carried on, indifferent, until a quiet hand placed bread near his trembling nose. Emma Brooks whispered from behind him, "Eat, it's okay," before vanishing again into the throng. Rusty chewed slowly, each bite a fragile reminder that kindness sometimes slipped through the cracks. Rusty slipped into the quieter side streets, walls close and painted with peeling posters. The smell of damp bread crust and rusted iron clung to the air like a weight. He found an abandoned box and curled inside, pressing against cardboard that sagged with rain. Cars hissed by at the far end, but here the silence held, cracked only by dripping gutters. A cat perched on the ledge above, tail flicking, eyes narrow, distrust clear in its stillness. Rusty lowered his gaze, offering no challenge, his breath steady but weary. The cat finally leapt down, landing near, and for a moment, two strays shared the same silence. He thought of Emma's voice, the softness that lingered like warmth on a cold morning. The box creaked as he shifted, guarding the little space he claimed as his world. Sleep pulled at him, heavy with hunger, yet stitched with stubborn threads of hope. By afternoon, shadows stretched thin across the cracked sidewalks as the day grew heavy. Rusty dragged himself toward a small park where laughter and grass promised a softer place. Children played catch, their shouts bright, but every parent's gaze turned him into a ghost. He sat beneath a bench, watching crumbs tumble from careless hands that never noticed him. A ball rolled close, and a boy reached to grab it, eyes locking with Rusty's tired stare. The boy whispered, he looked sad, but his mother's voice replied, "Don't touch, it's dangerous." Rusty lowered his head, hiding sorrow behind lashes too long to shield his heart. A breeze carried the scent of roasted peanuts, sweet and salty, and his stomach tightened. He closed his eyes, letting the grass tickle his belly, pretending it was home for a moment. The game moved on, and Rusty was left again with silence thick enough to sting. Evening came with the sky bruised purple and gold, and streetlights blinked awake one by one. Rusty limped along the curb, each step an echo of days without a name to call his own. The bakery lights glowed ahead, soft and steady, pulling him like a lighthouse calls the lost. Emma Brooks stepped outside, carrying a basket, and her eyes widened at the sight of him again. She said, "Still here, aren't you?" Her voice lined with concern, but threaded with patience. Rusty wagged once, a small hesitant arc of tail that carried all the courage he owned. Emma knelt and set the basket down, pushing a piece of bread toward him across the stones. He sniffed, then gently took it, teeth brushing her fingers like a question answered softly. She smiled, whispering, "Good boy," as the warmth of her presence spread wider than the light. For the first time, Rusty felt the night arrive with something more than hunger. It brought hope. The next day brought harsh sunlight that burned away the night's soft edges, leaving every crack sharp. Rusty lingered by the curb where Emma had fed him, waiting for a face that didn't appear. Instead, Victor Hale emerged from a nearby shop, his polished shoes tapping like warnings on stone. Victor Hale said, "You, again," his tone edged with disdain as he raised a hand to shoo him. Rusty lowered his body, tail curling under, his ribs showing with each shallow breath. The man kicked dust near him, voice loud enough to draw glances but not pity. Rusty darted back, ears pinned, the memory of the car door slamming heavy on his chest. Victor smirked, sipping his coffee, and muttered, "Filth belongs in the gutter," before striding away. The city noise drowned the moment, but the sting lingered like smoke that refused to clear. Rusty turned, eyes scanning alleys for shelter, his hope bruised but still clinging to the air. Rusty stumbled into a narrow lane where garbage bins lined the walls like silent judges. The air reeked of sour milk and iron, making his stomach twist with hunger. He nosed through a torn bag, pulling a stale crust, chewing as if it were gold. A shout rang out, a vendor yelling, "Get away!" and hurling a bottle that shattered near his paws. Rusty bolted, glass cutting close, his breath ragged as his heart pounded in his chest. He skidded to a stop near a shuttered shop, pressed against its cold metal with trembling legs. The shadows stretched long, cloaking him in loneliness that thickened with every echo of his panting. He remembered Emma's hand, the bread she gave, and wondered if that warmth would return. The alley held no answers, only the bitter taste of crumbs and fear. Still, his eyes gleamed faintly, as though hope itself refused to break fully. By late afternoon, clouds thickened, turning the city gray and heavy with drizzle. Rusty found a cardboard shelter near a dumpster, curling inside to shield against the wet. His stomach growled loud, echoing through the alley like a reminder of his frailty. A soft whimper answered, and from the shadows emerged a small, trembling figure. A young stray, a kitten no older than weeks, limped forward with wide, frightened eyes. Rusty stiffened, then lowered his head, sniffing gently as the kitten pressed close for warmth. The two huddled, rain tapping rhythm on metal above, breaths sensing in fragile harmony. Rusty licked the kitten's ear, a silent vow that he would not let harm come. The world still looked cruel, but here was something small enough to protect. Together, they curled tighter, turning loneliness into the beginning of belonging. Evening fell fast and the drizzle hardened into a cold rain that soaked a cardboard flat. Rusty stood, body shielding the kitten, his eyes scanning the street for another refuge. The kitten mewed softly, climbing against his chest as thunder rumbled beyond. Rusty nudged the tiny creature under a ledge, pressing close to block the worst of the storm. A group of boys passed by, one tossing a stone that clattered too near. They laughed and vanished, the sound crueler than the storm itself. Rusty growled low, a promise that he would fight, no matter how weak he felt. The kitten pressed closer, and his heart ached with both pain and purpose. He longed for Emma's voice again, the only human kindness that lingered in memory. Through the night's chill, he stood guard, teeth clenched against hunger and rain. Morning returned pale and damp, light sliding through clouds like reluctant mercy. Rusty still stood near the ledge, body tired, fur heavy with last night's storm. The kitten peeked out, eyes wide, paws tentative against the wet ground. Rusty guided the small one forward, nose nudging gently, urging movement toward safer ground. Together they crossed the narrow street, breaths fogging in the cold air. A driver slowed, honking lightly, then smiled as he passed, a rare kindness in steel. Rusty led the kitten into a small patch of grass by the bakery's side. The smell of bread rose warm, hope threading into the chill morning. Rusty's ribs ached, but the presence of the tiny life gave him new strength. For the first time he did not walk alone, and that changed everything. Rusty lingered by the bakery again. The kitten pressed close against his side, both fragile yet determined. Emma Brooks stepped outside carrying a tray, and her eyes softened as she spotted them waiting. She said, "You've brought a friend," her voice warm and patient as she crouched near the curb. Rusty's tail moved faintly, and the kitten peeked up with cautious eyes before hiding under his chest. Emma reached into her apron pocket, pulling bread and setting it gently on the stones. Her hand stayed open, steady, showing no rush, as if kindness itself had all the time it needed. Rusty sniffed, then nudged the kitten forward, letting the small one eat first. Emma whispered, "Good boy," her tone full of awe, as though she had discovered loyalty itself. For a fleeting moment, Rusty felt the ache of trust begin to ease its long wound. The morning crowd passed unnoticed, while the three of them formed a quiet bond on the street's edge. Later, Emma returned with a collar in her hand, plain leather, worn but clean. She said softly, "Maybe you had one once," her words carrying both sadness and curiosity. Rusty's ears flicked, eyes tracing the leather as memories pressed in like ghosts. He remembered Victor Hale's hand, the cold shove, the door slamming, the long walk alone. His breath quickened, and he stepped back, muscles tense, tail low, as doubt gnawed. Emma whispered, "It's all right," and lowered the collar, placing it gently on the ground near him. The kitten batted it curiously, paws clumsy, breaking the tension with innocent play. Rusty lowered his nose, sniffed it, and pulled back, torn between fear and belonging. Emma waited, her eyes patient, as if trust was a door that only Rusty could unlock. The moment passed with no answer, but the seed of choice was quietly planted. Rain returned by late afternoon, pattering against the awning where Rusty sheltered the kitten. A shelter van pulled up, painted white with bold letters that seemed colder than the storm. A man in uniform stepped out, calling, "Stray pickup," his voice practiced and tired. Rusty stiffened, ears sharp, eyes darting toward Emma, who had just come outside. She said quickly, "Not him. He's harmless," her tone urgent, standing between Rusty and the man. The worker sighed, rain dripping from his cap, muttering, "Rules are rules." Emma pressed, "Please, give me time," her voice trembling with conviction. The man hesitated, looked at Rusty, then at the kitten trembling beside him. Finally he nodded, climbing back into the van, leaving a silence thicker than rain. Rusty watched Emma, chest rising, a fragile gratitude dawning in his weary eyes. That night, Emma sat outside on the bakery steps, basket beside her, voice low as she spoke. She said, "You've been through something, haven't you?" her tone filled with quiet ache. Rusty lay nearby, head resting on paws, eyes reflecting the dim street lamp glow. The kitten curled against his side, purring faintly, a sound small yet steady against the hush. Emma leaned closer, whispering, "No one should throw away loyalty like yours." Rusty's ears twitched, gaze lifting, as though the words found an old wound long buried. The street was empty, but Emma's presence made it feel like a home no one could see. The night held them gently, shadows soft, rain tapping in rhythm like a lullaby. Rusty closed his eyes slowly, not in fear but in surrender to a peace he had not known. Emma stayed, silent now, her hand resting on the basket as if keeping vigil for them both. The next morning broke with pale light, spilling across the quiet street. Emma emerged carrying a blanket, folded carefully, and laid it near Rusty and the kitten. She said softly, "If you stay close, I can keep you safe," her words trembling with hope. Rusty sniffed the blanket, paused tentative, before lowering himself onto its softness. Kitten clambered onto it eagerly, kneading tiny paws, eyes bright with comfort. Emma's smile spread, the kind that reached her eyes and softened every worry. She said, "You deserve more than scraps and rain," her voice steady, conviction deep. Rusty's chest rose slow, a sigh leaving as if old chains loosened inside him. For the first time, his tail wagged freely, a motion unburdened by doubt. The street seemed brighter, as though trust itself had painted the morning new. The bakery's warmth was broken by harsh footsteps when Victor Hale appeared, voice sharp as broken glass. He said, "You're still wasting food on strays," sneering as his gaze locked on Rusty. Rusty growled low, body shifting forward, tail stiff, shielding the kitten pressed beneath him. Victor's boots scraped the stones, daring a step closer, his smirk deep with cruel amusement. Emma Brooks rushed from the door, her face pale, shouting, "Leave them alone, Victor." Victor laughed, cold and hollow, replying, "They're nothing but trash, just like before." The memory of being thrown from the car slammed through Rusty, but his stance held firm. Rain threatened in the air, heavy clouds dimming the street, shadows closing tight. Rusty barked sharp, teeth bared, his chest shaking with defiance stronger than fear. For the first time, he stood not just for survival, but for the life he now protected. Victor kicked a stone near Rusty, snarling, "Back off, mutt, or I'll finish what I started." Rusty lunged forward, barking louder, paws planted, eyes fierce despite his scarred body. Emma stepped between them, shouting, "Stop, Victor, you won't touch him again." Her hands trembled, but her voice carried, fueled by anger and fear. The kitten cried softly beneath Rusty's belly, its tiny sound cutting through the storm's edge. Victor scoffed, spitting at the ground, muttering, "Pathetic," but his eyes flickered unease. Rusty advanced another step, hackles up, his body a wall of loyalty and rage. Emma's voice steadied, "You abandoned him once, but he found his strength without you." Victor faltered, jaw tight, then turned sharply as if the moment itself had beaten him. The air stilled, heavy with the clash of cruelty and the courage that finally pushed it back. Victor stormed off into the rain, muttering curses swallowed by thunder, leaving silence behind. Emma dropped to her knees, reaching out, whispering, "It's over, you're safe now." Rusty stayed tense, eyes locked on the empty street, body still humming with defiance. The kitten crawled out, climbing onto Rusty's back, mewing as if declaring victory. Emma smiled through tears, stroking Rusty's damp fur, saying, "You're braver than anyone I've met." Rusty leaned into her hand, tail low but wagging, trust seeping through the cracks of fear. The storm broke open above, rain falling hard, soaking all three in its cold embrace. Yet in the downpour, warmth grew in the circle they formed, stronger than the storm. The bakery's lights glowed behind them, golden and soft, promising shelter and safety. For the first time, Rusty no longer looked like a stray. He looked like a protector. Inside, Emma laid blankets by the oven, the scent of bread wrapping them in comfort. She said softly, "This is your home now, if you'll have it," her words carrying promise. Rusty circled twice before lowering himself onto the warmth, sighing deeply. The kitten tumbled beside him, kneading fabric before curling against his side. Emma sat nearby, hands folded, watching them with quiet relief, as if seeing family. The storm raged outside, but inside the walls glowed with soft light and safety. Rusty's ears twitched at every clap of thunder, but Emma's presence calmed the tremors. Her voice lowered to a whisper, "You'll never be thrown away again." Rusty closed his eyes, finally letting go of the weight he had carried for so long. The sound of the oven's hum lulled him toward a peace he thought impossible. By morning, sunlight poured into the bakery, scattering rain's shadow and filling the air with hope. Emma unlocked the front door, smiling at Rusty, who stretched his body loose for the first time. The kitten darted clumsily toward the light, chasing dust motes like sparks of joy. Rusty followed, tail wagging freely, ears perked, no longer burdened by fear. Emma knelt, arms open, saying, "Welcome home," her voice carrying a final note of promise. Rusty stepped forward, pressing his head into her chest rumbling with quiet relief. The kitten mewed from her lap, small paws climbing, sealing the bond that had formed. The smell of fresh bread rose, weaving with the warmth of trust in the air. For the first time, the bakery wasn't just shelter. It was family. Rusty closed his eyes, resting against Emma, and the morning stretched brighter than ever. The bakery smelled of fresh bread as Rusty lay curled on his blanket near the oven, the kitten resting against him. Emma Brooks moved between counters, her face lighter now that worry had eased into peace. She said warmly, "You two have brought life back to this place," her words floating like the scent of sugar. Rusty lifted his head, ears perking, tail thumping faintly against the floorboards. The kitten stirred, batting at his ear before tumbling clumsily onto the floor. Emma laughed, kneeling to scoop the small one up, pressing it gently against her shoulder. Rusty's eyes followed, soft and protective, his body relaxed in the glow of belonging. The storm outside was gone, replaced with golden morning light that painted every corner in warmth. The bakery no longer felt like a refuge. It felt like a promise of family fulfilled. For the first time in years, Rusty closed his eyes, not to escape, but to rest safely. Later that day, children pressed faces to the bakery glass, pointing at Rusty, who dozed by the counter. One boy asked, "Is he yours?" And Emma smiled, replying, "He's part of the family now." Rusty's ears flicked at her voice, his eyes half opening as the children waved. The kitten pounced at shadows on the tiles, tumbling over itself, sparking laughter from the crowd. Emma leaned on the counter, pride filling her chest as she watched the bond grow. Rusty stretched and walked closer, head lowered, tail wagging softly as he approached the window. The children squealed with joy, pressing palms against the glass, their smiles wide. Emma whispered under her breath, "They see you now, not as a stray, but as hope." Rusty leaned gently against the glass, eyes steady, as though thanking the world for noticing him. The bakery glowed brighter than its lamps, alive with laughter and trust. Evening settled in with the smell of cinnamon, and Emma closed the bakery shutters slowly. Rusty sat near the door, ears alert, as if guarding the home he now claimed. Emma said, "You don't have to protect us alone," brushing his head gently as she passed. The kitten clambered onto Rusty's back, mewing softly, a small shadow of comfort in the dim. The street outside darkened, but inside the oven glow bathed them in amber warmth. Rusty shifted closer to Emma's chair, pressing his body lightly against her leg. She whispered, "You belong here," her voice trembling with affection. She no longer hid. The kitten curled into a ball on Rusty's blanket, tiny breath steady like a lullaby. The bakery quieted, each sound soft and safe, like a house learning to breathe again. Rusty closed his eyes, no longer listening for threats, but for the steady rhythm of love. The next morning, Emma walked Rusty into the park, leash loose in her hand, the kitten cradled in her other arm. Rusty's steps were steady, his ears high, tail wagging freely in the sun. Emma laughed as children ran toward them, calling, "It's Rusty," as if he were already theirs. Rusty lowered himself, letting small hands pet his back, his eyes gentle and calm. The kitten peeked from Emma's arms, blinking at the world with curious eyes. Emma said, "He's not afraid anymore," her voice full of pride as she watched Rusty bask in affection. The wind carried scents of grass and bread, weaving together his old struggle with new peace. Rusty licked one child's hand, a small gesture that drew delighted giggles from the crowd. Emma's gaze softened, knowing he was no longer defined by the past, but by the love he inspired. The park glowed brighter, as though nature itself welcomed his new chapter. As dusk arrived, Emma returned home, Rusty padding beside her, the kitten riding on her shoulder. The street lamps flickered on, casting golden pools across the quiet lane. Rusty walked close, his body relaxed, every step carrying the ease of trust. Emma said softly, "This is our life now," her voice a gentle vow meant for all three. The kitten purred loudly, pressing its tiny head against her neck, secure in its place. Rusty lifted his head, eyes steady, scanning the horizon not for danger but for peace. The bakery loomed ahead, lights glowing warm, promising dinner and rest. Emma glanced down at Rusty and whispered, "You filled a space we didn't know was empty." Rusty wagged his tail slowly, gaze soft, his heart finally light. Together they crossed the threshold, not as strays but as family bound by love. Morning sunlight spilled across the bakery floor, painting long golden stripes over the wooden boards. Rusty stretched, tail sweeping slow arcs, the kitten tumbling over him with tiny paws. Emma said softly, "Look at you two, you've made this house a home." Rusty pressed his head into her hand, eyes glowing with a peace he had fought to earn. The smell of bread filled the air, mingling with laughter that carried beyond the walls. Later that day, Emma walked Rusty through the park again, leash loose, the kitten perched in her bag. Children gathered, calling his name, their voices full of joy. Rusty sat tall, tail wagging proudly, no longer the frightened stray of before. Emma said with pride, "He belongs here now." The air felt lighter, the park brighter, as if love itself had changed the world. Evening brought a calm hush as Emma closed the bakery shutters, the smell of fresh loaves lingering. Rusty lay on his blanket, the kitten curled on his back, both drifting into rest. Emma whispered, "Safe now, always safe," her voice steady with promise. The oven's glow softened the room, and Rusty's eyes closed slowly, his breaths even and unafraid. The bakery felt less like a shop, and more like a sanctuary of love. Night deepened, and Rusty stirred, walking to the doorway where the moonlight spread silver over the street. Kitten padded after him, tiny steps quick, eyes wide with wonder. Emma joined them, her voice gentle, "We've come so far together." Rusty lifted his head toward the stars, no longer seeking escape, but embracing peace. The three stood quietly, a family stitched together by kindness. The final morning arrived with the sky painted soft pink and gold, promising a new beginning. Rusty rested by Emma's side on the steps, the kitten curled on her lap. She said, "You've found your place." "And so have we." Rusty's tail wagged gently, his eyes closing as if savoring the moment forever. The bakery behind them glowed warm, the world ahead open, and for the first time, Rusty was home.